Hi, Dr. Robert Selig. In today's video, I want to discuss this current case and a health trend that is so common in our world today. So first, the parents called me on this 13, 14-month-old child about 4 or 5 weeks ago, telling me that their child is constipated. Now, nobody should be constipated, yet alone a 14-month-old child. So we have to address that. Now, they are distant patients, so they live in another state, and they did go to their pediatrician, and the pediatrician told the parents, get the baby on Miralax, suppositories. And then they called me because they've been my patients for a long time. I've known the parents since they were in high school. I watched them with their first child, and this is their second child. So the mother, when she was pregnant with this child, was in a 4 low. She had recently just given birth previously, about 2 years ago, and then a year later, her mother had passed. So she was in a 4 low under a lot of stress, and now we supported her through the pregnancy, and she ended up doing really well with the pregnancy. It was a home birth, no epidurals, no pitocin, no silver nitrate drops. So it was a really beautiful baby. But knowing that Mama Bear was in a 4 low with this child, so I knew that this child would be a burnt out baby. So Dr. Paul Eck, the father of hair mineral analysis, mineral balancing, he coined the phrase burnt out babies. So we see that these mothers that are very toxic are giving birth to children, and then in utero, they're passing all the toxic metals into their children. So when they're talking to me, I know a little bit about their history. I know who they are. When they're saying their child is constipated, of course, we got to address that with the most natural, safest means possible. So instead of these synthetic Miralaxes and suppositories with God knows what in it, we're going to address the constipation very simply with the least amount of harm possible with homeopathics, and we're going to employ the Epsom salt. So what I told Mama Bear to do was to take your milk, put it in a bottle, and we're going to add anywhere from an eighth to a quarter teaspoon of Epsom salt. Now, not the Epsom salt you buy at the box stores, the highest quality Epsom salt, magnesium sulfate, without the fragrances, just the highest quality from the great oceans. And then you have to adjust the dose, because if the baby can't drink the milk, it won't work, because Epsom salt is very bitter. So a quarter of a teaspoon to an eighth of a teaspoon in mama's milk, and that will work like a charm. But again, the parents have to monitor that the baby's drinking it. So they may have to adjust the dose to what will be applicable for their child. So that was strategy number one, so we can get the Epsom salt in mama's milk. The second part was, I know that they got all the tissue salts laying around, so I told them we're going to employ the sodium family of tissue salts. That would be nat myrrh, the nat phos, the nat sulf. So the sodium regulates the water element, and especially sodium sulfate, nat sulf. That's working the water element in the liver to move that bile so we can have a bowel movement. And then the other fourth tissue salt was silica, which is just a great constipation remedy. So I told them to take 3 pellets of each of the salts, add it into about 16 ounces of spring water, and then they're going to feed that to the baby throughout the course of the day. So every time the baby takes a drink, they're hydrating and they're getting a dose of the tissue salts. So we were going to run with the tissue salts, run with the Epsom salt. And then the third thing I told them to do, remember, I don't have the hair analysis in front of me. I told them, as soon as you hang up the phone, get me a sample of the hair and get that off in the mail tomorrow. So I don't have the hair analysis in front of me, but when I hear constipation, I know the mother's history. So I'm thinking that this baby is loaded with aluminum, because aluminum is one of the most desiccating, drying agents out there. And so the baby's constipated. I know that there probably is some aluminum involved. So I told them to order homeopathic aluminum in a 30C potency that we will use to deal with the aluminum toxicity that I don't know that the baby has. I'm just suspecting it. So we're going to fight fire with fire because it's just homeopathic aluminum, just a good constipation remedy. And then eventually, what happened over the next few days, they called me back. They said they mailed out the hair sample and the baby is starting to poop on its own with just the Epsom salt and the tissue salts. And they just got the aluminum in, so they're going to add that into the mix. And so about 2 weeks after that conversation, I did get the hair tissue back, and here are the results. So as we look at this hair test, we can see that the lead is displacing the calcium, causing a high calcium magnesium ratio. This high calcium magnesium ratio, that ratio is involved in all excitable tissue, nerves, skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, cardiac muscle. All excitable tissue depend on a healthy balance of calcium and magnesium. When the bowels aren't working, then we have the smooth muscles in the large intestine is not flowing. So we have to be able to relax the large intestine so the baby can go. Hence why we're doing the Epsom salt protocol. But to fix the constipation, we have to address this high calcium magnesium ratio at a 16-to-1 ratio. And it's probably more than likely it's the lead displacing the calcium causing this discrepancy in this ratio. Secondly, the baby's in fast oxidation. Fast oxidation is great. However, the problem is it's just too fast of oxidation because all these toxic metals, we see the iron, the manganese, the copper, the aluminum, the lead, the cadmium, the arsenic, all of these toxic metals are putting tremendous amounts of stress on the kidney adrenal complex, causing sodium and potassium to be lost as they go rogue, showing high on the hair analysis, showing that this child is under extreme amounts of stress. So we got to deal with these toxic metals as we will get into the mineral balancing part to this equation. Now, the second thing we noticed is, and I've been harping on this for almost 20 years now, that every child today is born with low zinc, high copper across the board. So we got a copper dysregulation problem. Remember, copper has an incredible impact on children, and particularly the young infants, because copper is needed for so many aspects of human physiology. When copper is dysregulated, remember, copper is the final donator of electrons to molecular oxygen in complex 4 of your mitochondria in creating ATP, where the copper will bind to the oxygen, split the oxygen into water, creating the universal juice ATP. When we have a copper dysregulation, that may mean we may not be delivering the copper to the mitochondria, and then we tend to go more anaerobic. And when we go anaerobic, instead of pyruvate going to acetyl-CoA into the Krebs, into the electron transport, now that pyruvate is going to lactate, to lactic acid, fermentation, setting the table for candida, yeast, mold, parasites, worms, all that type of stuff thrive and survive in an anaerobic acidic environment. So we got to deal with this copper, plus the zinc deficiency. Without zinc, you don't have an immune system. You lose the DNA auditing system. Zinc is patrolling all the fluids in the body. So that could be the cerebral spinal fluids, the synovial fluids, menstrual fluids, seminal fluids, digestive juices, salivary fluids, tear fluid, all fluids, because zinc is acting as an antiseptic in the waters, and it's also acting as a lubricant to prevent cytoadherence of microorganisms. That lubrication of the zinc in the waters prevents these microorganisms from adhering to the cell membrane. So it's acting as an antiseptic, patrolling the waters. So every time a woman's cervix opens, she's not going to get candida and a UTI because zinc is patrolling the waters. Zinc is needed for transcription factors, especially in a developing young child. They're going to go through a lot of transcription factors, hence they need that zinc so that DNA can be transcribed and translated into a usable protein for protein synthesis. So zinc is activating all the white blood cells. Zinc is making the pancreatic juices. All the pancreatic enzymes depend on zinc. The stomach acid depends on zinc. The immune system depends on zinc, transcriptional factors. So we can see this zinc deficiency is a huge factor, and that's rock bottom. So as Dr. Eck was harping on burnt out babies, I've been harping on every child today is born with this copper dysregulation and this zinc deficiency. So in the Western world, I'm saying that everyone's walking around with a subclinical marginal zinc deficiency. In the developing world, the WHO, the World Health Organization, is on record telling you 2 billion people have a gross zinc deficiency, but they're not taking into account the marginal subclinical zinc deficiency that we will see on children. It may not show up on the first test, the zinc deficiency and the high copper, but by the second, third, fourth, or maybe even the fifth test, you will see that zinc deficiency and that high copper. So we have to address this or the kids don't develop. And then we see the other toxic metals, the aluminum, the arsenic, the cadmium. And mercury and cadmium will destroy the zinc. Copper will block the zinc. So we have to be able to really address that. And with the low phosphorus, we know there's a lot of dysbiosis because the ATP, that's the phosphorus, the cell membranes, that phospholipid bilayer, nucleic acids, all depend on that phosphorus. So we can see the low phosphorus, we're going to be low in the protein synthesis. We're going to have a lot of dysbiosis with the candida infiltration. And again, when copper is dysregulated, it goes more anaerobically because copper loves to go aerobically. But if we can't deliver the copper to the mitochondria, then the body tends to go more anaerobic, setting the table for the unwanted guest. We have to be able to fix this so the baby can develop really without getting autism and learning disabilities and all the chronic infections over and over. So we're going to address the mineral grid, but I will employ the strategies for addressing this, but I'm going to keep them on the constipation protocol probably for another week, because before we start moving the metals around, I got to make sure those bowels are moving, or those metals get recirculated, can end up in a part of the brain, and that could be the autism and the OCDs and the anxieties and the fears and the phobias and all that stuff. So eventually I'm going to switch from the constipation protocol to addressing the mineral grid. When I do address the mineral grid, probably in another week or so, when I feel confident the baby is going consistently every day, then we're going to transition to focusing on the mineral grid. When we do address the mineral grid, we got to deal with these toxic elements. So I will put the baby on a zeolite, but it will be a child-proof, child-friendly zeolite, which is a spray. So they'll probably start with 1 spray, work up to 5 sprays so we can grab the intestinal metals so they don't get reabsorbed and recirculated. Secondly, we're also going to come in with micro dosing of the minerals. I will micro dose a liquid zinc. I will micro dose a liquid magnesium. I will microdose selenium and silica. And then you can see with this high aluminum, when I was talking to the parents before I had the test, we can see the aluminum did show its face, and it's pretty high. Not the highest I've ever seen, but that's still significant. And that aluminum is a desiccating agent, part of that constipation. Aluminum is a +3 metal, and that's going to displace the boron, and we need the boron to help with calcium and magnesium absorption. We will also incorporate using boron via boric acid into the bath. We will add the Epsom salt into the bath water on the mineral balancing program with the micro dosing of the minerals. And we're going to come in with the tissue salt. We will be coming in with magnesium phosphate. We will be coming in with calcium phosphate. I certainly will be coming in with the tissue salt copper and the tissue salt zinc. So we're going to hit the tissue salts really hard because anyone can take them. It's one of the most beautiful aspects of the tissue salt is they're kid proof. The seniors can take them. So if you can't swallow or you're compromised by the taste or whatever, tissue salts are beautiful. So we can address the mineral grid with the tissue salts. I will be microdosing the crude minerals, coming in with the tissue salts, coming in with the bath soaks with the Epsom salt and the borax, so we can start to address this profile so this child can develop beautifully and not becoming dependent on the Epsom salt to move the bowels. Once we start getting the bowels moving, then we can really address this mineral so they don't become constipated. So that's my game plan with this child. And again, I will be starting the mineral program probably in about another week. I just got to make sure those bowels are consistently moving. Then we're going to take this head on. So that's what I wanted to talk about in this video today. Thank you for watching. And if you have any questions, just get back to me.